Usually when we talk about a political election, there's this expectation of a gradual shift, like watching the tide come in. You see the water line slowly creeping up the sand over hours. You can kind of predict where it's going to stop based on, the historical high water marks.
Right, yeah. It's traditionally a very incremental science. I mean, you look at the past data, you map out the demographic trends from the last 3 cycles, and you make a reasonably safe bet on a marginal swing of, what, 2 or 3% in vote share.
Exactly. But then you step into the atmosphere of today, May 4, 2026, and suddenly we aren't watching the tide anymore. We are watching a tsunami completely redraw the coastline in a matter of hours. The historical high water marks are just, they're gone.
Hmm.
You're looking at an electoral map that is, well, honestly, it's unrecognizable.
It really is.
So whether you're a hardcore political junkie who has been tracking every single fractional shift in vote share for the last 5 years, or you're just someone trying to understand why the stock market is suddenly reacting and how the leadership of massive swathes of India's economy just flipped overnight, this deep dive is for you.
And I think it's important to say that today is not just about who won and who lost. It's about how the very mechanics of winning and losing in Indian politics might have just fundamentally changed. I mean, the ground has completely shifted beneath the feet of some of the most entrenched political dynasties in the country.
Yeah, that's perfectly put. So we're going to break down the historic 2026 Assembly election results pouring in across 5 distinct regions today. But we are maintaining a hyper-focus on the absolute epicenter of today's shockwaves, which is West Bengal. We are talking about a state where the 15-year, seemingly invincible rule of Mamata Banerjee's Trinamool Congress, the TMC, appears to be coming to a crashing halt at the hands of the BJP.
And we are looking at raw live data today.
Yes, minute-by-minute updates.
Right, from counting centers, live reactions from the financial markets, and statements pouring in from political leaders on the ground. And frankly, the claims flying around from both sides are incredibly charged right now. There are massive allegations of foul play and intense rhetoric from across the political spectrum.
Which brings up a really crucial point for you listening. Our goal today isn't to validate the spin from the left or the right. We aren't endorsing any viewpoints or championing any ideologies here. We are strictly impartial analysts. We are here to strip away the rhetoric and look purely at the mechanics of what the data is telling us and what the claims are.
Exactly. We're looking at the structural shifts, the raw numbers, and the specific strategic executions that led to this moment. We are analyzing the mechanics of the upset, not taking sides on the highly partisan narratives surrounding it.
Okay, so let's zoom straight into the sheer, staggering numbers pouring out of West Bengal. I want to look at the raw math first, because it defies all the conventional modeling leading up to this day. So the West Bengal Assembly has 294 seats. To form a government, you need a simple majority of 148 seats. That's the threshold for absolute power in the state.
And as of this afternoon, the data from the Election Commission of India shows the BJP is not just scraping past that 148 mark. They are leading in over 176 seats, and they're surging toward 200.
Wow.
Meanwhile, the incumbent TMC, a party that won a commanding 215 seats just 5 years ago in 2021, is trailing at around 94. And the left front and the Congress are hovering near absolute zero, sitting at maybe 1 to 3 seats combined.
I mean, I'm struggling to square that circle. The BJP is poised to form its first ever government in West Bengal since India's independence. This isn't just a defeat for the TMC, it's a complete rewiring of the state's political DNA. And what really jumps off the page at me is the voter turnout. We are looking at a staggering 92.47% overall voter turnout.
Yeah, and in Phase I, it was over 93%.
Over 93%. I mean, over 92% of the electorate showing up.
Yeah.
That is an astronomical level of civic participation. So let me ask you, does a 92% turnout always signal a straightforward anti-incumbency wave? Or, given the sheer volume of voters, is this a case of a totally new voting demographic being activated? Like, are these people who never voted before suddenly coming out for the BJP?
Well, it's a volatile mix of both, but we have to contextualize that number historically. A turnout over 90% in Bengal is incredibly rare, and it almost always acts as a structural earthquake. It actually surpasses the massive turnout of the 2011 election.
Which was the election where Mamata Banerjee originally ended the 34-year rule of the left front, right?
Exactly. Historically in Bengal, when you see a turnout pushing past that 90% threshold, it's not just people fulfilling a civic duty. It's a visceral, collective mobilization to make a definitive, aggressive statement of change. It indicates that the voter wasn't just persuaded, they were agitated.
Right. But it's not just that the BJP got more votes overall. The true story is where they got those votes. The geographic shocker of this election is the presidency region we're talking about, Kolkata and Howrah. In the 2021 elections, the BJP got exactly 0 seats in this belt. 0. Today, they have flipped the script completely and are leading in 55 seats in this region alone.
It's astounding.
It's like watching a seemingly indestructible dam hold back water for years. You expect that if it's going to fail, it'll crack at the edges first, maybe the rural areas, maybe the border districts. But instead of cracking at the edges, this dam just bursts right at the absolute center. They breach the urban core. They are leading in traditional TMC absolute strongholds like Champalkur, Entally, Belagata, Maniktala, Dum-Dum, and then there's Diamond Harbor.
Oh, Diamond Harbor is the crown jewel of the TMC's organizational structure. It is the absolute bastion of Abhishek Banerjee, Mamata Banerjee's nephew, and the TMC's national general secretary. The entire party machinery in that district is built around him. For the BJP's Deepak Kumar Halder to be leading there is akin to breaching the inner sanctum of the TMC's power base. But let's look at why the presidency region flipping is so seismic.
Yeah, let's get into that.
Because for decades, the conventional wisdom, the absolute accepted narrative among political scientists was that Bengal's cultural DNA, particularly in Kolkata, was immune to the BJP's brand of politics.
Right, the Bajulak culture.
Exactly. Kolkata prides itself on being the intellectual cultural hub of eastern India. The Bajulak culture, the educated middle-class Bengali demographic, historically viewed the BJP's saffron politics as an imported Hindi heartland phenomenon that didn't align with Bengali exceptionalism.
Which begs the question, how on earth do you suddenly flip 55 seats in an area that fundamentally views you as a cultural outsider? You don't just walk into a region that fiercely protects its distinct identity, convince them to adopt yours overnight. What was the actual mechanical bridge the BJP built to get over that cultural moat?
Well, they didn't ask Kolkata to adopt a new identity. They aggressively co-opted the existing one. For years, the TMC used Bengali regional pride as a defensive shield, actively labeling the BJP as outsiders or Bohiragodo.
Right, outsider was basically the main talking point in 2021.
Exactly. And the BJP realized they couldn't win a purely ideological war without first winning the cultural war. So they systematically claimed the mantle of Bengali cultural giants. They integrated icons like Rabindranath Tagore, Swami Vivekananda, and Subhas Chandra Bose into their daily political messaging.
Oh, okay.
Right into their rallies, their visual identity. They essentially reshaped their national narrative to look and feel like a local Bengali homecoming. Furthermore, they paired this cultural integration with a hyper-focus on urban decay and civic infrastructure.
Which would really appeal to that specific demographic.
Precisely. It directly appealed to the educated urban voters in Kolkata who felt the city was falling behind other major Indian metropolises.
The visual contrast of that is stunning, by the way. For the past 15 years, the political map of this region has been solidly green, the color of the TMC. Now, the map is awash in saffron. The irony is just palpable. Kolkata, the intellectual hub that prided itself on resisting this specific national wave, is the very place that has abandoned the incumbents so dramatically.
That's a massive shift.
It proves that relying solely on regional identity as a defensive wall is no longer a viable long-term strategy if the opposition can successfully integrate that identity into a larger, more aggressive national narrative. The fortress wasn't just breached. The people inside opened the gates because the messaging finally resonated with their immediate grievances.
And those macro-geographic shifts are built on the backs of incredibly intense, hyper-local micro-narratives. The macro story of the presidency region falling is made up of individual battles of political survival that truly define the tension of this election. We have to look at the high-profile clashes to understand the psychology of the electorate.
Oh, absolutely. There is no clash more defining, more symbolic of the entire state's struggle than the battle for Habanapur and Nandigram. We are talking about the ultimate showdown. Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee going head-to-head with her former lieutenant-turned-fiercest rival, the BJP leader of the opposition, Suvendu Adhikari.
Right.
This is political theater at its absolute highest stakes. Adhikari isn't just a candidate, he is the architect of the BJP's aggressive ground game in Bengal.
Yes, and he directly challenged the chief minister's authority. And the counting in Habanapur, which is Mamata Banerjee's home turf, was a psychological roller coaster. The sources detail how incredibly tense it was. In the early rounds, Adhikari actually took the lead.
Right, which is wild to think about.
He claimed a lead of around 2,200 votes at one point, explicitly stating to the press that he was dominating in the Hindu majority areas of the constituency.
Just pause on that for a second. For a sitting chief minister to trail in her own bastion, even briefly during the early counting, has to send massive shockwaves through the counting centers. It immediately validates the challengers' narrative that they have penetrated the deepest, most secure parts of the incumbent's defenses.
It does.
But true to her reputation as a street fighter, Banerjee fought back. By the later rounds, the sources show her securing a commanding lead somewhere between 16,700 to over 17,300 votes against Adhikari in Bhabanapur.
She reasserted her dominance on her home turf, absolutely. But the dynamic is deeply complex. Because while she is winning her personal localized battle in Bhabanapur, Adhikari is simultaneously maintaining a comfortable lead of 3,000 to over 7,000 votes in his home turf of Nandigram.
Right. So what does this mean for the concept of the local hero in modern politics? Because we are watching a scenario where a colossal political figure, a chief minister known universally as Didi, is overwhelmingly winning her own neighborhood, but she is simultaneously losing her entire state. Has local charisma been entirely overridden by statewide structural fatigue?
Well, it suggests a fundamental shift in how voters process their ballots. Winning Bhabanapur saves her personal electoral dignity. It proves she still has deep personal loyalty in her immediate vicinity.
Yeah.
But that localized charisma is no longer enough to counter a highly organized statewide ideological campaign by the opposition. The voters in Bhabanapur voted for their neighbor, the woman they know personally, but the voters in the rest of Bengal voted for a systemic change. It shows that personality politics has a geographic limit when faced with overwhelming organizational machinery.
And it wasn't just these massive political titans making waves either. There were these incredibly poignant, highly symbolic races happening underneath the main event that tell you exactly what the voters were thinking.
Right.
Look at the Panahati constituency. The BJP fielded Ratna Debnath. Now, for the listener who might not recognize that name immediately, she is the mother of the victim in the horrific RG Car hospital rape and murder case that shook the state to its core. And the data shows her pulling ahead and leading in her race.
That is a profound data point. The BJP's decision to field her was a direct, localized indictment of the incumbent government's handling of law and order, specifically regarding women's safety.
Yeah.
Her lead is not just a political victory, it's a deeply visceral social statement by the voters of Panahati. It shows that recent, deeply traumatic social issues can completely short-circuit traditional party loyalties. The electorate wasn't voting on policy there, they were voting on a demand for justice and accountability.
Exactly. And then, on the complete flip side of that emotional spectrum, you have the race in Chitura. The TMC fielded Debangshu Bhattacharya. He's the man who literally wrote and sang Kela Hobe, the phrase that translates to "the game is on," which was the defining viral battle cry of the TMC's massive 2021 victory. It was inescapable 5 years ago.
It was everywhere.
And today. He is trailing significantly behind the BJP candidate. The voice of the previous triumph is losing in an election where the game appears to be decisively over for his party.
The irony perfectly encapsulates the dramatic shift in the state's mood. And you also have the ISF's Narshad Siddiqui leading in his seats like Chapra and Minakan, maintaining his distinct pocket of influence among specific minority demographics.
Oh, wait, and Humayun Kabir too, right?
Yes, Humayun Kabir. He's a suspended TMC MLA who formed his own hyper-local party, the Amjanata Unayan Party, and he is stunning traditional analysts by holding a massive lead of over 8,000 votes in Nada.
See, what races like Siddiqui's and Kabir's tell me is that while the overarching narrative is a massive BJP sweep, the electorate in Bengal is still highly fractured. They're still incredibly responsive to hyper-local identity-based appeals. The BJP won the macro war, but these micro battles show that the political ecosystem hasn't just become a simple two-party monolith. It's still a complex web of local grievances.
It is, yeah.
You can just imagine the scene on the ground. The sources describe massive celebrations erupting outside the BJP office in Kolkata, workers smearing saffron powder, chanting. But then, just miles away at places like Asansol Engineering College or Bankura University, there are tense, violent scuffles breaking out between BJP and TMC supporters, requiring central armed police forces to baton charge the crowds.
It is a highly volatile atmosphere because the stakes are existential here. The TMC is fighting for its political survival, and the BJP is fighting to cement a historic conquest. Which brings us to the most critical part of our analysis today.
Yes, the how.
Exactly. These massive regional flips, these individual victories, they weren't just the result of good speeches or catchy slogans. They were meticulously engineered. They were the result of deep systemic strategies, massive logistical operations, and fierce controversies over the very mechanics of how the voter rolls were managed and how the vote was conducted.
So let's get into the mechanics of the upset. The BJP is explicitly crediting what they call their 5Ms strategy: Muslim, Mahila, which means women, migrants, Matua, and machinery. This was their structural blueprint.
To understand the sheer strategic weight of the 5Ms, you have to understand the foundation it was designed to destroy. For 15 years, Mamata Banerjee relied on a nearly monolithic support base among Muslim voters, combined with overwhelmingly strong support from women, cultivated through massive direct cash transfer welfare schemes like Lakshmir Bandar.
Okay, so she had this locked in.
Right. What the BJP did was methodically map out the fault lines in that coalition and apply immense pressure to each one.
I want to break down exactly how they executed that, because you can't just walk in and peel away a demographic that has been loyal for a decade and a half. Let's start with the Mahila demographic, the women voters. Suvendu Adhikari explicitly stated that Hindu women voted en masse for the BJP this time around. How did the BJP counter the TMC's deeply entrenched welfare schemes aimed specifically at women?
They pivoted the narrative from economics to existential safety. The TMC offered financial security through welfare, right? But the BJP argued that financial security is meaningless if physical security is absent.
Going back to the RG car case.
Exactly. They heavily amplified the outrage surrounding the RG car case, framing it not as an isolated tragedy, but as a systemic failure of the state apparatus to protect its women. They organized massive grassroots protests, bringing national leaders down to march in local neighborhoods.
Making it personal.
Right, making the abstract concept of law and order feel intensely personal and immediate to the female electorate. They effectively superseded the appeal of welfare checks with the primal demand for safety.
Wow. And what about the Matua and Muslim demographics? Because how do you fracture a voting bloc that has been historically unified against you?
Well, the Matua community is crucial here. They are essentially Hindu refugees who migrated from Bangladesh over the decades, seeking secure citizenship and social integration. The BJP leaned heavily into the implementation of the Citizenship Amendment Act, the CAA, promising swift, permanent, and legal integration for this specific community. By addressing their deepest generational anxiety, which is the fear of statelessness, the BJP consolidated the Matua vote, which then acted as a catalyst for broader Hindu consolidation in the bordering districts.
And the Muslim vote?
Regarding the Muslim vote, the strategy was division rather than acquisition. The presence of strong independent or alternative minority leaders, like the ISF candidates or Humayun Kabir we mentioned earlier, naturally splintered the minority vote. The BJP didn't need to win the Muslim vote, they just needed to ensure the TMC didn't win it completely.
So they aggressively consolidated their own potential bases while actively encouraging the fragmentation of their opponent's base. I mean, that is textbook electoral mechanics. But here's where we hit the most explosive, controversial structural element of this entire election. We cannot talk about the mechanics without talking about this SAR controversy.
No, we really can't.
For the listener, SAR stands for Special Intensive Revision.
This is the administrative event that will likely be debated by political scientists for the next decade. The special intensive revision of the electoral rolls prior to this election resulted in a record 90 lakh voter deletions.
Let me just repeat that for the listener so the scale really sinks in. 90 lakh. That is 9 million voters removed from the electoral rolls.
It's massive.
In a state of roughly 100 million people, you're talking about nearly 10% of the population being scrubbed from the voting registry. That's roughly equivalent to deleting the entire voting population of a small country like Sweden off the rolls in a single swoop. And the narratives surrounding this are completely diametrically opposed based on our sources.
Absolutely. The BJP and the proponents of the revision view the SIR as a long overdue, necessary sanitization of a deeply corrupted voter roll. Their argument has long been that previous elections in Bengal were plagued by massive electoral fraud, duplicate entries, millions of dead people remaining on the rolls, and illegal migrants being registered to artificially inflate the incumbents' numbers. To them, deleting 9 million problematic entries isn't disenfranchisement. It's leveling the playing field and restoring the integrity of the democratic process.
It's like a massive operating system update on your computer. The developers are saying, hey, we're just removing malware, clearing out dead files, and patching vulnerabilities. This is essential maintenance for a healthy system.
That's a good way to look at their perspective.
But the users in this case, the TMC and their supporters, are screaming that their essential working files just got deleted without any warning, and they are blaming the developers for sabotaging the machine. The TNC views this as a targeted, weaponized campaign of mass disenfranchisement, specifically aimed at deleting their core voters, particularly in minority-dominated areas, to artificially engineer a BJP majority.
And the TMC leadership is actively utilizing that narrative of sabotage to explain the numbers we are seeing today. Mamata Banerjee released a desperate SOS video message to her party workers in Bengali. She is outright claiming that counting was deliberately halted in at least 100 places across the state.
Wait, 100 places?
Yes. She is alleging that the electronic voting machines, the EVMs, were actively tampered with.
She also claimed that power cuts were intentionally engineered at counting centers, specifically to blind the CCTV cameras during crucial moments of tallying.
Right.
And she accused the Central Armed Police Forces, who were deployed by the national government, to maintain security of directly oppressing TMC workers, intimidating them, and forcibly occupying their local party offices. I mean, TMC MP Kalyan Banerjee literally called it Sir harassment and stated on the record that the BJP must pay for it. They are painting a vivid picture of an election stolen through administrative mechanics and brute force rather than lost at the ballot box.
The Election Commission of India, however, has pushed back against these allegations with absolute procedural rigidity. The chief electoral officer, Manoj Agarwal, held press briefings to explicitly state that the short power outages reported were completely normal logistical hiccups, the kind you see in any massive infrastructure operation in India.
Just standard grid issues.
Exactly. He emphasized that robust power backup systems were instantly activated, and more importantly, that the security protocols make tampering impossible.
Right. He detailed a three-tier security system around the strong rooms where the EVMs are kept. He explicitly stated that there is never any scope of tampering, because the CCTV coverage is visible on large screens outside the halls to all authorized party agents 21047. So you have this intense cognitive dissonance happening in real time. The official electoral body is projecting total procedural control, transparency, and administrative routine, while the incumbent state government is projecting a narrative of a hostile, systemic, and highly illegal takeover.
Which presents a fascinating psychological dilemma for the TMC leadership.
Yeah,
Well, on one hand, telling your workers the system is fundamentally rigged provides an immediate, palatable excuse for the staggering losses. It softens the blow, right? The narrative becomes, we didn't lose the mandate of the people, we were cheated by the machinery.
okay, I see that.
But the risk of that narrative is immense, paralyzing demoralization. If you convince your ground troops that the game is irrevocably rigged, why would they continue to play?
Exactly. If I'm a local TMC worker at a counting center and my chief minister just told me the central forces are hostile, the EVMs are hacked, and the cameras are turned off, why am I staying there? Why risk my safety for a predetermined outcome?
That is precisely why Mamata Banerjee's video message was framed not just as a complaint, but as a literal SOS, a call to arms. She told them, do not leave the counting area. This is the BJP's plan.
Oh, so she's flipping it.
Yes, she is trying to convince them that the rigging requires their absence to be successful. She promised them you will win after sunset, implying that the later rounds of counting, perhaps from areas less susceptible to alleged tampering, would reverse the early trends.
So she's trying to keep them motivated.
Right. She said, we will fight like tiger cubs. She is attempting to weaponize their feeling of being cheated into a state of defiant, aggressive vigilance. She needs them angry enough to stay, not depressed enough to go home.
But contrast that intense paranoid vigilance with a scene at the BJP headquarters. The sources mention BJP leader Tejinder Pal Singh Baga casually distributing chalmuri, which is a popular local puffed rice street snack, to party workers in an atmosphere of absolute relaxed celebration. He was openly declaring the arrival of Ram Raja, a term signifying ideal righteous governance in Bengal.
The visual juxtaposition is incredibly jarring.
It really is. One side is issuing frantic SOS videos from bunkers about stolen democracy. The other side is handing out street snacks on the sidewalk to celebrate a historic, systemic victory.
And the fallout of this victory extends far, far beyond the borders of West Bengal. We are not just talking about a change in regional administration here. We are talking about a fundamental shift in the economic trajectory of eastern India and a massive, potentially fatal blow to the national political opposition.
Okay, let's talk about the money first. The economic implications are immediate. For years, the core pitch of the BJP to the voters of Bengal wasn't just cultural, it was economic. They aggressively marketed the double engine model.
Yes, the double engine.
For the listener, the double engine refers to having the same political party in power at the state legislative level as is in power at the national central government level in New Delhi. The BJP's argument has consistently been that Bengal's economy has stagnated and massive industrial capital has fled the state because the TMC government was constantly locked in a combative war with the central government.
Exactly.
They argued the state was intentionally blocking central funds and central industrial initiatives purely out of political spite.
And the financial markets appear to be entirely buying into the promise of that alignment. The sources note that the markets are reacting very positively to these election results as they trickle in. Major financial firms like Kotak Institutional Equities are explicitly viewing this projected BJP victory as a definitive sign of long-term political stability for the region. They are projecting a massive potential industrial revival. There is enormous anticipation regarding the unlocking of central schemes.
Give me an example of the kind of capital we're talking about.
Well, look at Ayushman Bharat. It's the massive national public health insurance scheme designed to provide coverage to the bottom 50% of the country. The TMC administration in Bengal has long blocked its implementation in the state, opting for their own state-level scheme, Swasthya Sathi.
Okay.
The expectation now is that a BJP state government will immediately integrate Bengal into these massive national economic and welfare grids, opening up billions of rupees in central funding that was previously bottlenecked by federal-state friction. Investors see a streamlined pipeline from New Delhi to Kolkata for infrastructure, logistics, and manufacturing investments.
But let me push back on this economic euphoria for a second. Isn't the double engine a massive double-edged sword for the BJP? Think about it. For 15 years, if an infrastructure project failed, if unemployment rose, or if a major corporation pulled a factory out of Bengal, the BJP had a built-in scapegoat.
They did.
They could easily point the finger at Mamata Banerjee and say, the state government is obstructing progress. We want to help, but Didi won't let us.
They enjoyed the luxury of being the opposition. They could promise the moon without having to build the rocket.
Exactly. But now,
Yeah.
if the state economy doesn't immediately boom, if the capital doesn't suddenly flow back into Kolkata, the BJP has absolutely no one else to blame. They own the whole car now. They own the engine, the steering wheel, the brakes, and the gas tank. The pressure to deliver on reversing decades of perceived economic stagnation that predates the TMC and goes back to the left front era is now entirely on their shoulders.
That is the ultimate peril of absolute power. The double engine is no longer a campaign slogan. It is now a high-pressure, real-world testing ground. The BJP has to move incredibly fast on big-ticket industrial projects to prove the model works. Remember, there are no other major state elections on the horizon until 2027.
Right.
So the BJP wants to use Bengal as a global showcase, marketing it to international investors as India's newest, safest, and most lucrative bet. If they fail to attract that capital, or if bureaucratic hurdles persist despite the double engine, the central narrative of their governance model collapses completely.
And while the BJP is looking at an economic testing ground, the national opposition, the NDA bloc, is staring into a political abyss. The implications for the National Alliance are staggering. The sources explicitly refer to Bengal as the Great Wall against the Modi juggernaut. And today, that wall didn't just crack, it was utterly demolished.
It cannot be overstated how devastating this is for the opposition's long-term strategy. The NDA alliance just lost its most battle-hardened, aggressively anti-BJP street fighter and Mamata Banerjee. By breaching this fortress, the BJP has effectively dismantled the foundational theory of the opposition, which is the Bengal model.
Explain the Bengal model for us in the context of national strategy.
Sure. The Bengal model was the operating theory that a strong, deeply rooted, highly charismatic regional identity could serve as an impenetrable shield against the BJP's national unified wave. The national opposition relied on that theory for survival. They believed that if regional leaders played their local cards right, leaning heavily into local language, culture, and localized welfare, they could hold off the BJP indefinitely in non-Hindi-speaking states. Today's result proves that theory fatally flawed. It proves that even the most fiercely independent regional identity can be overcome, bypassed, or co-opted if the BJP plays a patient, highly organized, and adaptively ruthless long game.
So with the fall of that model, it creates a massive strategic vacuum for the NDA alliance. They are looking toward the 2029 national elections, and their strongest anchor in the East has just been uprooted. They're left without a proven blueprint to stop the BJP's momentum. It turns 2029 from a potentially competitive multi-front war into what some analysts are already calling a victory lap for the NDA. But within the BJP itself, this historic conquest sets off a massive internal scramble. The immediate question is, who's next?
Right. Who becomes the chief minister of this massive, newly conquered state? Unlike in other states where they might project a clear leader, the BJP did not project a CM face in Bengal prior to the election.
Which is a deliberate strategy to prevent internal factionalism during the campaign, but it leaves the field wide open now. The absolute frontrunner, the man of the hour, has to be Suvendu Adhikari. He took the fight directly to Mamata Banerjee in Nandigram in 2021 and won, and now he's led the charge across the entire state. He's the architect of the ground game and the most prominent face of the opposition over the last 5 years.
But the BJP's internal dynamics are notoriously complex, and they rarely reward purely based on seniority or perceived turn. You also have Dilip Ghosh, the former state party president. He is the organizational veteran, the man with deep, established connections to the grassroots cadre across the rural belts.
Okay, so he's got the ground support.
Yes. Then you have rising stars like Agnimitra Paul, who is gaining massive prominence as a leading woman figure for the party, which is crucial given how heavily the BJP courted the female vote in this cycle.
And didn't the sources also mention Papia Adhikari?
They did. She has been leading an aggressive, highly visible urban outreach push. She focused heavily on civic infrastructure and urban decay, a message which clearly resonated given the stunning results in Kolkata we discussed earlier. And you can't discount Swapan Dasgupta, who brings that crucial intellectual, policy-driven edge. Elevating someone like him helps counter the lingering TMC narrative that the BJP are uncultured, anti-intellectual outsiders to Bengal's refined political heritage.
But here's the most important historical precedent regarding the BJP's leadership choices. They absolutely love the X factor.
They really do.
They have a very recent history of springing massive, out-of-nowhere surprises. Look at Mohan Yadav being elevated in Madhya Pradesh, or Nayab Singh Saini taking over in Haryana, or Bhajan Lal Sharma in Rajasthan. The BJP high command frequently bypasses the established, media-anointed frontrunners to elevate unexpected faces who fit a very specific long-term caste, demographic, or organizational strategy. So Suvendu Adhikari might be handing out the sweets to the cameras today, but he might not be sitting in the chief minister's chair tomorrow.
The decision will be made behind closed doors in New Delhi, not on the streets of Kolkata. And that decision will be based entirely on strategic calculations for the 2029 general elections, not simply as a reward for the victories of 2026.
It is a dizzying amount of change for one state to process. But we have to pivot seamlessly now, because if you think the rulebook was rewritten in Bengal, you need to look at what is happening down south. While Bengal is undeniably the epicenter of today's political earthquake in terms of national party consolidation, entirely different, equally massive seismic events are happening in Tamil Nadu and Kerala. Let's look at the southern shockwaves.
Yeah, while the nation was fixated on the east, the political landscape of the Deep South was being fundamentally, perhaps permanently, rewritten.
Let's start with Tamil Nadu, because this situation is straight out of a movie script. We're talking about the TVK earthquake. Actor Vijay, known universally to his massive fanatical fanbase as Thalapathy, or Commander, recently launched his political party, the Tamilaga Vitri Kazhagam, or TVK. And in its absolute debut election, its first time ever facing the voters, it is doing the unthinkable.
The raw data from Chennai is just astounding. The Tamil Nadu Assembly has 234 seats. The simple majority mark is 118. Early trends show the newly formed TVK crossing that majority mark outright, leading in nearly 100 to over 118 seats, depending on the minute-by-minute updates.
They are not just making a dent. They aren't just playing kingmaker. They are shattering the entire system. They are pushing the incumbent, ruling DMK, led by the deeply entrenched Chief Minister M.K. Stalin, to a distant second or even third place in certain regions. The sources highlight that both M.K. Stalin and his son, Udayanidhi Stalin, who was widely viewed as the heir apparent to the Dravidian legacy, are actually trailing in their own absolute strongholds of Kolathur and Chapakthru Valikini.
To understand the sheer magnitude of this upset, you have to understand the impregnable nature of Tamil Nadu politics. For over half a century, since the late 1960s, The state has been completely, exclusively dominated by a classic Dravidian political duopoly, the DMK and the AIA-DMK.
Right.
These aren't just parties, they are colossal, deeply entrenched social movements built on linguistic pride, caste dynamics, and massive generational welfare networks. National parties like the Congress or the BJP have historically never stood a chance of forming a government there, and third-party regional challengers have always fizzled out after a single cycle.
But Vijay managed to completely disrupt these legacy giants. I wonder the mechanics of this, because you can't just rely on box office appeal to win 118 assembly seats against a half-century-old machine. The sources say he weaponized his massive, highly organized fan clubs, turning them into a disciplined political cadre overnight. But how? A fan club organizes movie screenings and cuts cakes. A political cadre gets millions of people to voting booths and navigates complex local alliances. What was the actual bridge between those two things?
Well, it wasn't an overnight pivot. It was a decade-long organizational evolution. Unlike other actors who entered politics purely on charisma, Vijay spent years quietly transforming his Macaulay Yakam, his fan welfare associations, into highly structured, localized, block-level networks.
Oh, so he's been building this.
Exactly. During crises like floods or the COVID-19 pandemic, these fan clubs were operating essentially as mutual aid societies, distributing food, organizing blood drives, and providing financial assistance, often reaching people faster than the state apparatus. By the time he officially launched the TVK, he didn't just have fans, he had a pre-built, battle-tested, highly loyal grassroots infrastructure in almost every village and ward in the state.
That's incredible.
He combined that pre-existing network with a messaging strategy that tapped into a deep, latent frustration with the established duopoly. He presented himself not just as a cinematic hero, but as a completely clean, systemic reboot, free from the generational corruption allegations that plague the legacy parties.
So in Bengal, we're seeing this aggressive consolidation under a massive national party umbrella. But what fascinates me is that if you travel down the coast to Tamil Nadu, the exact same anti-incumbent rage is playing out. But the cure the voters chose couldn't look more different. They didn't go national, they went hyper-local. Are we looking at two completely different rule books for Indian democracy, depending on your latitude?
It looks that way on the surface, but the underlying psychological driver is identical. In the North and East, the trend is toward national consolidation under the BJP umbrella because the BJP successfully presents itself as the ultimate agent of change against stagnant regionalism.
Okay, yeah.
But in the Deep South, specifically Tamil Nadu, the resistance to that national Hindi-centric umbrella is still fiercely ingrained in the cultural DNA. Yet the desire for change, the exhaustion with the local incumbents is equally strong. So instead of turning to a national party for change, they turn to a hyper-local, hyper-charismatic disruptor. The structural rulebook is different, but the overarching theme is extreme anti-incumbency and a sudden, violent willingness to completely discard the historical political establishment if a viable alternative presents itself.
The visuals coming out of Chennai are incredible. Vijay's family members are literally blowing whistles in celebration on balconies. Fans are flooding the streets, already declaring him the next super king of Tamil Nadu politics, drawing direct comparisons to the legendary M.G. Ramachandran, MGR, the original actor turned chief minister. And you contrast that ecstatic, chaotic energy with the deeply gloomy scene at the DMK headquarters, where workers are literally taking down the massive celebratory tents they had set up just hours earlier in anticipation of a victory.
It's quite a scene.
It's the thrill of unpredictable victory and the crushing agony of dynastic defeat happening in real time.
And just across the border in Kerala, another massive reversal is taking place. This one feels a bit more traditional in its mechanics, but it is deeply consequential for the national map.
Right. In Kerala, the Congress-led United Democratic Front, the UDF, is crossing the 71-seat majority mark in the 140-seat assembly. They are effectively unseating the incumbent Left Democratic Front, the LDF, government led by the veteran Pinarayi Vijayan.
What is significant here is the brutal return to the historical mean. Historically, Kerala voters have almost always alternated between the Congress-led UDF and the communist-led LDF every 5 years. It was a pendulum that never stopped swinging. But in 2021, Pinarayi Vijayan broke that multi-decade trend, riding a wave of praise for his handling of crises to secure a historic second consecutive term.
But it seems the voters have decided that 2 terms was enough, and they are reinstating the old rule of alternation.
They are punishing the incumbent left, and the punishment is severe. The sources note that Chief Minister Pinarayi Vijayan himself is actually trailing in his home constituency of Dharmadam against his Congress opponent. For a sitting chief minister, a man who was previously seen as the untouchable patriarch of Kerala politics, to trail in his own bastion is a stark indicator of the sheer depth of the anti-incumbency wave.
Now, what does this mean for the larger national picture?
Well, it's a massive, desperate lifeline for the Congress Party. While their overarching national alliance, the NDA bloc, is suffering a catastrophic, demoralizing defeat in Bengal, the Congress itself is securing a crucial, wealthy state government in the South. It gives them a stronghold, a source of resources, and a narrative of relevance.
But for the left,
For the left front, this is an unmitigated disaster. Combined with their near total, absolute wipeout in Bengal, a state they ruled for 34 years, losing Kerala, means the left might be left without a single state government in India for the first time in over 50 years. It is an existential crisis for the communist movement in Indian electoral politics.
that is a staggering historical footnote to a day already overflowing with history. And briefly, just to complete the national map based on the data, the sources confirm that the BJP is retaining power in Assam for a third consecutive term, with Chief Minister Himanta Biswa Sarma leading comfortably in Jalukbari. And in the Union Territory of Puducherry, the NDA alliance is cementing its lead.
Those results represent continuity, proving that their governance models in those specific regions are holding strong despite the massive disruptions happening in Bengal and Tamil Nadu.
It's a picture of an electorate that is deeply restless, violently punishing stagnation, but willing to reward perceived delivery and aggressive organizational outreach. Well, let's take a breath and summarize the breathtaking scale of what we've witnessed today, May 4, 2026. We have watched the political map of India undergo a profound, permanent transformation. We saw the absolute fall of the TMC in Bengal after 15 years, breached by a BJP machine that finally cracked the cultural code of Kolkata. We discussed the immense, highly controversial mechanics behind that shift, from the stunning 90 lakh voter deletions under the Special Intensive Revision to the surgical demographic precision of the 5M strategy.
We analyzed the dawn of the double-engine economy in the East, the massive pressure now entirely on the BJP to deliver industrial revival, and the terrifying existential threat this poses to the national opposition, the NDA bloc, who have unequivocally lost their Great Wall.
And we watched a stunning cinematic political debut in Tamil Nadu, where actor Vijay's TVK completely upended half a century of entrenched Dravidian duopoly by converting fan mutual aid networks into a lethal political cadre, while Kerala returned to its traditional roots by brutally punishing the incumbent left. It has been a day of fortresses falling, and that leaves us with a profound question to consider based on everything we've dissected today.
Yeah, today we saw impenetrable fortresses fall in Bengal, Kerala, and Tamil Nadu. If 15-year incumbents with massive street power and historic Dravidian legacy parties with decades of entrenched generational organization can be swept away almost overnight by a mix of hyperlocal grievance strategies, massive structural voter roll revisions, and meticulously planned celebrity disruption. What does this mean for the very concept of the safe seat in a modern democracy?
That's exactly the thought I want to leave you with. Is the era of the invincible political dynasty, the party that can rely purely on historical loyalty, welfare dependency, and regional identity, officially over? Are we entering an age where the electorate is so volatile, so demanding, and the political machinery so ruthlessly adaptable that no government, no matter how deeply rooted, can ever truly feel safe again? That is the question you have to mull over as the final votes are tallied and the new power structures take their seats. The tide isn't just coming in anymore. The water is completely rewriting the rules of the shoreline. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We respect your time, and we encourage you to keep looking past the raw numbers and keep questioning the deep mechanics and the hidden narratives driving those numbers. Until next time.